And this, I'm sure you know already, is an hour-long session. And what we thought it would be fun to spend some time with you, showing you what you can do with the version of Copilot that comes with Microsoft 365 as a complimentary version. I'm not going to say free, because I guess you pay for it as part of your subscription, but it's available to everyone. So I just wanted to give you some ideas, some things to try, and hopefully some inspiration on how to make life a little bit easier and to save you a little bit of time. So I have a few ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll through, first of all, a little bit of information about Copilot, because I think people find it quite confusing, and I don't think Microsoft helps because there are different versions of Copilot. So I just want to explain what the differences are and what you get with each of the versions that are available. And then we're going to go off, we're going to go experiment a little. And at this point, you are very welcome to join in. I'm going to try and not go too quickly so everyone gets a chance to try as we have a go at working with it. So there are three main things that you can do with Copilot. It's excellent at summarizing. I have a few ideas around that. You can also use it to create something new. And you can also use it for inspiration. And inspiration can be, literally anything. It can be, can you give me some ideas on how to name this session in a fun way? Right through to, what should I eat for my lunch? So I want to give you just some ideas around, just ideas of how to get started and some things you might like to try. And as we go along, give you a few tips, some things that I've learned since I've been using Copilot for the last year and a half, and some ideas on how to ask effective questions. So before we plow in and actually do some live examples, I just wanted to explain to you what the differences are between the different versions of Copilot. So quite recently, I'll say when, I think it's probably back in springtime, they introduced across all of Microsoft 365 a complimentary version of Copilot, which was accessible to everybody who has Microsoft 365. If you don't have Microsoft 365, there is also a version of Copilot you can use by going onto their browser and searching for Copilot, and there's like a free online version as well. If what you see today excites you and you think, oh, this looks really cool, this could actually save me huge amounts of time, and you decide to take the plunge and move on to a paid version of Copilot, there are two choices. There's a Copilot Pro version, which I think they've mainly designed more for sort of individuals. And this adds Copilot into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and also Outlook. So you can go directly to those programs. You'll have a Copilot button within there that then allows you to do work on your spreadsheets. You can ask it to create formula, that kind of thing. In your PowerPoints, you can ask it to make PowerPoint presentations for you. If you are a business, most businesses go for the Copilot for Microsoft 365 version, which is like the full version. It's the all singing, all dancing version, which importantly includes Teams. So one of the things that I know people really like with Copilot within Teams is its work that it does with meetings and meeting summaries. So it includes that. And it's also what they call fully grounded, which is an expression you hear a lot in Copilot. And this idea of grounding is actually what makes the fully paid version special, because it has this ability to look inside your data by itself, and it can find on its own your files, and it can find on its own your emails. Now today, because we're using the complimentary version, we have to give it the files and give it the emails to work with, but the full version has the ability to go and search for those things by itself. So if anybody is, I guess, tempted after what they see today that this is the way to go, then most businesses, this is the version they tend to opt for. So I don't know if any of you are already on the full version of Copilot. Out of curiosity, if you are, please do put in the chat and let us know if you're on the full version of Copilot, because I will reference it a few times where I can if I know anybody is already on the full version. So let me know in the chat pop in the chat if you have the full version or whether you're like us working on the free version today. Okay, so now before we get started, again, a couple of things that you need to know. There's a few things I want you to remember today to take away with you. I have 2 tips for you. Big tip number 1. When you're working with Copilot, or in fact, any AI, it could be Copilot, the free version, the paid version, it could be ChatGPT, it could be Gemini, whichever version of AI you decide to experiment with. Can I encourage you to get into the habit of asking follow-up questions? As you're about to see, one of the cool things about Copilot is we can talk to it like it's another human being. So we can ask it a question and it will, in the style of another human being, be able to answer us. But the cool thing is it remembers all the questions we have already asked. So therefore, we can ask follow-up questions and another question and another question. So unlike a programming language where you have to put in a very set, structured statement, and if you forget something or if you want to add something, you kind of start over again and you write out the whole sentence again. With Copilot, there's no need. You just add on the extra thing you want or the extra thing that you think about. So this is something we're going to practice. So tip number 1, remember to ask follow-up questions. Big tip number 2, there is a different way of working. You can do it a different way. You can also ask very detailed questions. So in order to improve what you get out, sometimes the way to do that is to be very precise about exactly what you would like to have and to tell Copilot very clearly what you want. So for example, if you want it to show something to you as a table, there's 2 ways of doing that. You could say, show this to me as a table, or you could say, show this to me as a table, including these columns, and you can literally list them. So this is the other way which you can work. So we're going to explore both of these. You'll see some of my questions will be very, very vague actually, and others you'll see I'll make much more effort to put in a lot of detail when I ask my question. So these, if you remember anything for today, these are the 2 things that I'd like you to remember. Now, for those of you that are looking for a little bit more, again, once you get started, people often ask me whether there is a way, like a good thing to remember when it comes to creating these questions, or as Copilot would call them, prompts. So actually a nice way to think about them is maybe 4 sections. Think about what your goal is and tell Copilot that. Maybe it could be you want to create a proposal, you want to create an email. Give it the context that you want it to use. Give it the source, the file, the information you want it to work with, and then lay out some level of expectation. I want you to do this in a professional way. I want this to be fun. I want you to act as a coach, something like that. So an example would be of a very detailed question. You might say to Copilot, act as a problem-solving expert. So sort of laying the foundation of how you want it to behave. Provide me with a detailed step-by-step guide to tackle, and inside those square brackets, you tell it what your problem is. You basically tell Copilot all your problems. And then you could say, use this information, and we use a slash when we want to add a file. I'll show you in a second. And then you would add in the file that you wanted it to use, or if necessary, more than one file. So we're being very detailed and very structured about what we want it to do and how we wish it to behave. So I've just given you quite a lot of information there. So let's take this information we've just looked at. Let's come on out of here. Let's go to Copilot and start to experiment so I can explain more clearly exactly what I mean. Now, finding Copilot, this is always a good question. So with the free version of Copilot, you should be able to find it in one of 2 places. Option number 1, come to Teams. And with any luck, you already have over here on the left-hand side, Copilot. If you don't see it, don't panic. You can click on the 3 dots at the bottom, and start to search for Copilot, and you can add it over on the left-hand side of your screen. So this might be the easiest choice. I think lots of us now, not all of us, but lots of us now do use Teams on a regular basis. So therefore having Copilot just over here on the left-hand side, super convenient. So this is your first choice. So if you fancy joining in with me, if you have that ability, if you have more than one screen you can use today, feel free to go and take a look. Choice number 2 is to come to your browser. And when I use my browser, I don't have any special shortcuts for this. What I tend to do is I tend to add an extra tab here at the top. And I simply type in office.com. Let me share this with you in the chat. And then when I press enter on here, oh, a few of you on the full version, cool. When I press enter on here, it'll then take you through to sort of Microsoft 365's online world, the online world. And what they've done recently, they've redesigned this, and you can see they've made Copilot a much bigger part of it. So again, even if you're using the complimentary version today, you will have chat here. So let me give you a moment. I'm hoping you can join in. Go find Copilot. Now, if you're in a different world, if you already know you have a shortcut, maybe you already have a button at the bottom of your screen that you can press, please do it the normal way for you. I'm just trying to give you a couple of hopefully easy suggestions if you're completely unsure as to where to go. So either come to your browser and go to office.com, or hopefully it'll be inside your Teams, and that's perhaps an easier way. You can choose Copilot over here on the left-hand side. Now, those of you who have the paid up version of Copilot will notice something extra on your screen. Here at the top, you will have 2 buttons that you can press. You'll have work, which is the side which is fully grounded. So what you can do is you can say, find me a file, find me an email, tell me what's happening on my calendar today. And on the other side, you'll have an option which is web. And the web side is, I guess, basically where we are right now on this complimentary version, which is slightly more focused on using the internet for its answers. However, as we're about to explore, we can add also files into here. So if you've got the fully paid up version, you are very welcome to use it on the work side, and you'll find probably you'll get some slightly more interesting ideas coming or being given to you than you'll see that we'll get on the complimentary version that I'm going to use today. So let's just give you all a moment to get here. Hopefully everyone has arrived. If you're having any stress, please let us know. Tracy will try and help you inside the chat. Right. So this is what you see when you first land. You'll have in the middle of your screen a box that allows you to add a message in and ask Copilot a question. And you'll also see underneath that some ideas of things to try. Again, if you're on the fully paid up version and you've chosen at the top here, work, these ideas will be very much work-based ideas. It'll be ideas around looking at things in your calendar, finding your meetings, that kind of thing. For us, the complimentary version, the ideas are more internet-based. And you can get more of them by clicking this See More button underneath. It tries to give you ideas all of the time as to how you might use Copilot. Over here on the right-hand side, I then have this panel open where it is giving me a history of all of the chats that I've used. I was having a little practice earlier with some of the files I was going to work with you on today. So you can see this is everything I was doing this morning when I was having a little bit of practice and I was testing out some of my files. This is your history. Now, if this for now you find this too much to see on screen, we can hide this away until we want to come back to it later. So this button here at the top lets you hide that panel. And then to return to it, you just click this button in the corner and it'll pop it back out. And then another very handy button is this one here, this purple one in the corner, which allows you to open up a new chat, which would lead us on to my tip number 3. So my 2 tips so far have been use follow-up questions or use very detailed questions. My 3rd tip, and this is another important one, which if you can remember would be great. If you find that the responses you're getting when you're testing out things with me today aren't quite what you want or what you were hoping for, sometimes a good tip is to go onto a new chat. What we find with Copilot, because it remembers all of your previous questions, this is like a little bit of a blessing and a curse. So it's a blessing because we can do tip number 1. We can ask loads of follow-up questions. But it can sometimes be a problem because it remembers all the previous questions. And therefore, you can sometimes end up going off in a funny direction and not quite getting what you want. So actually, sometimes starting fresh on fresh chat is a nice thing. You can kind of, start over and ask questions, even potentially more or less the same questions, but I think you then naturally go off maybe in a different direction and perhaps get slightly better results. So that would be my big tip number 3. Now, what we're going to do together today, and I'm hoping everyone's found their way now, is I want to show you some ideas. And I want to show you some ideas which I'm hoping will be helpful within a work scenario using this complementary version of Copilot. If you have the full version, that's fine. You'll just see on your version, you'll have even more that you can do than I'll be able to do on this complementary version. So let's look at an example. So the first example I thought would be really interesting would be to explore this idea of summarizing and to explore this idea of using follow-up questions. So rather than using one of the ideas down here, I'm going to use my plus button to fetch a file. And I'm going to say here, add content. And it's going to come up with a list of files. It sort of remembers the files which I have been working on recently. Or I can type here search, and I can sort of narrow down to a particular file I'm hoping to use. Or if I'm really struggling to find the file that I particularly want, I can choose upload and I can go search my laptop, or I can click on the cloud and I can search through all of my online files, my OneDrive, my SharePoint, my Teams. So the cool thing about this complementary version, even though it can't go and find the files all by itself, doesn't mean that you can't add them yourself. You can go get them and you can go pick them. So if you fancy joining in, ideally right now, you want to pick maybe a Word document or maybe a PDF. If it happens to be a fairly chunky file, that would be quite nice. Maybe you've got a report on something or a big handbook or a manual or something like that would be kind of fun to play with. It's not essential. It can, to be honest, it could be literally anything and it will still work. So I've added my file. I am allowed to add more than one. So if I wanted it to compare 2 files, perhaps, to see the differences between them, I could do that. That would be fine. But let's begin just with this one file. And I'm going to say here, can you summarize? And in fact, I don't even need the words can you. I could just say summarize. I find myself wanting to be polite to Copilot. And then once you've asked it to summarize, once you've added your file, you just press enter. It will take a second, but it will look at the content of that file and come back with a report on what it finds. So to recap, what we've done is we've clicked the plus, we've added a file, and then we've asked it to summarize. It should come up with a report. So I'm going to scroll on down and we can see here, this is roughly the content of the file. There's a little conclusion here on the end. Now, there are some buttons here at the bottom. We're going to talk about those a little bit later. So just bear with me for now. I'm going to try a few more things first. Then here underneath, we get other examples, other suggestions of follow-up questions that you might like to try. So actually, Copilot all the time encourages you around tip number 1, which is to do follow-up questions. But I think what we're going to do, it's a little bit more fun, is we're going to give it our own questions. So let's assume in this scenario, But what it's giving me here is too much. So I could say, using Copilot at the bottom, in fact, let's stop saying can you. Let's just say reduce to the 5 main, what should we say, actions I could try. Now, don't get fixated on how I'm wording things. You are welcome to word things however you would like. Word them in the normal way for you. So there'd be numerous ways I could ask this question. I could say, give me 5 key facts. I could say, give me 5 main features. Can I see 5 actions to try this week? Okay, so there's lots of ways that you could word this. Word it the way you want. Do not try and memorize the way I do it. I change it every time that I try. We're supposed to be able to talk to Copilot like it's another person. So talk to it that way. Use your own phrases and your own words. And then again, we're going to click the send button, or you can press enter. Now, I didn't need to tell it which file to use. I've already told it that higher up, so it already knows that bit. So this is an example of me using this idea of follow-up questions. And I'm hoping we're going to get less. Nice. And then maybe we could go further, right? Because then maybe I don't like this layout. So perhaps I want it in a different layout. And you can ask for any layout that you wish. You could say to it, can you turn this into an article? You could say, could I have this as a bullet list? I could say here, let's turn that into a table. So if you want a different format, that's fine. You go ahead and you ask it exactly what you would like, whatever would be useful for you with whatever you're intending to do with this information. Now with tables, I quite like a table. I'm a bit of a fan of a table. And it gives you a table which is just kind of giving me like its best guess, because I didn't explain to it here exactly how I wanted the table to look. Although that would be a good strategy. So if I have an idea of exactly what I want in my table, I would tell it. But because we're going and we're playing with this idea right now of these follow-up questions, let's add it as another step. So we've said, let's turn that into a table. Now let's say, can you add some real life examples? Or perhaps with your document, you might try something different. You might say, can you add a timeline to that? You might say, could you remove column and then tell it which one you no longer want? You might say, can you put that into alphabetical order? I don't know. It doesn't matter what it is, but have a think of something. You could try my example here, or if with your data it would work better with a different example, then go ahead and try that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to click send. And it should then include my real life examples here. So let me just give you a minute while you explore. And I've got a couple of little tips around this as well. There's a very good question in the chat right now about privacy and protection for these documents. Please be reassured that although it is potentially, if we request it, using the internet to answer questions, when you add your files into here, your files stay within your tenant. There is no access to these files from anybody from the outside world. This is like a one-way tap. You can fetch things from the internet, but it does not send anything to the internet. So it is as protected as you doing a chat in Teams or you creating a document inside Word. Okay, so I wanted to give you one more little example with this. And the last example was around language. Now, the document which I'm using, I actually used the full version of Copilot to create. And as you can see, it's a little bit Americanized in the words that it's used. So what I could say to it here is I could say translate into, this is one of my favorite things, so I can't spell English today, English UK. So translate into English UK. Now you'll notice today actually that every time I make a spelling error, I will probably fix it, and it's mainly because you're all watching. But in real life, I tend to not bother as much. Copilot's very forgiving of you making little spelling errors, so don't feel too precious about that you have to spell everything exactly correctly. Mostly it'll work out what you mean. That's better. I've now got S where I'd like it. And you can do this with anything. So if you are asking Copilot to help you, and maybe it does use sort of an English US spelling, and you think, oh, that's really annoying, just ask it to translate into English UK. And in fact, you can ask it to translate into almost any language now. There are over 50 languages which Copilot now supports. So if you'd like to translate the whole thing into a different language, what should we go for? Any requests? Any requests? Let me know. I'm going to go for French. If you want to try anything else, then please feel free to give it a go. If anybody speaks any languages, I should say if anybody reads any languages, please feel free to test it and then to let us know in the chat whether it did a good job or not. We have had speakers who are speaking, like, natural speakers of Russian, Greek, Polish, Spanish. That it? I think that's all I've tried. Hindi, who have all come back and said to me, yeah, does a good job. But let me know. I hope it's working. Let me know how you're doing. Now, hopefully, this is a good example of this concept of using follow-up questions. And this is definitely a way to work. So this is definitely a nice idea. If you're a bit unsure of what you want, think about doing it this way. Asking a question, then delving deeper and deeper and deeper until you eventually get what you require. But there is, of course, another way. So let me go ahead and it's going to add a new chat up here. I just want to show you something, I guess, a little bit more from scratch. And let's go ahead and add exactly the same file again. And within here, I'm going to basically ask it to do all of those things that I've just done, but within one statement, because this is the other way to work. If your brain works in this way, you can at the very beginning ask a very detailed question, and you can include all the information that you need within the first prompt that you create. So let's think what we did. We ultimately asked it for 5 main features. So let's say, please, I'm going to say please, I'm very polite with it. Please can, I'm going to say, please give me, as you can tell, I'm making this up, 5 key features formatted as a table, including real life examples. And then what else did we do? Oh, can I have one table as English UK? Oh, can't spell English today. English UK and one in French. Okay, so rather than doing this follow up, instead, if you've kind of worked out what you want, or maybe that's how it began with lots of follow-up questions, then you're like, no, actually, this is really useful. I could do this regularly. Put it all into one question. We used to have a little countdown here that said we had 125,000 characters that we were allowed to use in a single prompt. And that little counter has now been taken away. And I haven't actually looked it up recently. Copilot is a massively changing environment. They add things to it, what feels like every 5 minutes. But I'm thinking in my mind, if the little counter's been taken away, then perhaps now there is no limit. Or the limit is so ridiculously large that they don't even bother showing it inside the box anymore. So you have massive amounts of space here for putting in a very detailed prompt. And I'm going to click send here. Now it might not be perfect because I just kind of did that kind of quick there. But what it should do is take the essence of what I'm asking, and I'm hoping it'll be correct. So we should end up with an English version, and we should end up with a French version. Now, if you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. There are things I could use this for. There are things I get sent, files I receive, work that I have to do on a regular basis that this could help with and could save me time. Another nice thing about working with Copilot is if you do come across a gem, right? You work something out, or someone in your company shares an idea that works really well for them. Once you've used it, you can then hover over the prompt that you have just created. And here in the corner, there's a, oh, let me click on there. Here in the corner, you need to click on it for it to sort of sit still long enough for you to select. There's a little save prompt box in the corner. And the joy of this is that you can save them to use them again and again and again. So if I choose here, save, it asks me the name I want it. So let's just call this 5 key facts as a table. Let's just call it that. And I'm going to go save. And it tells me it's going to put it in the Copilot prompt gallery. So the prompts gallery is at the bottom here. So at the bottom over on the right-hand side, you should see a little button with sparkles on, is the best way to describe it. And if you click on there, okay, it comes up with a list of ideas, things to try. If you see anything really good on here, now for those of you who have the full version, definitely for you, look down this list for anything which you think, ooh, I like that, that's really useful. And click on the bookmarks to save the ones which you want to try later. The ones that you've bookmarked through here, or the ones that I've just saved, like I showed you just now, will then be here at the top under your prompts. This is the one we did just now, so that you can reselect it anytime you like. Now, I appreciate I might want to change the file each time, but it's the, I guess the main part of that prompt that I'm interested in, the way I've asked it for the key features, the way I've asked it for a table. I've explained how I want the table to look, and you could go into much more detail there if you wanted. And I've asked it to do the translation. Okay, let me come out of here. So again, let me just give you a minute to give you a chance to look. I think that's just answered Richard's question, actually. So yes, you can definitely store them like we've just done. You can also, if I come back up to one, select here a link. You could share it as a link. Or to be fair, you could honestly, you could just highlight the thing and copy it and share it with people that way as well. So sometimes I think it's quite nice if the company is keen on this idea of just getting people a little bit more into the Copilot and trying to think up some ideas. It's an excellent idea to share all the good ones with people, to have a place that they go, or for someone to maybe collect them and maybe every week or every month send out, a prompt to try, just to encourage people to try some different things. And when people find really good ones that are really saving them time, to give them a way to share them with others. Now there's also some buttons down here which allow some sharing as well. I am not going to forget them, I promise. I just want to show you a couple more things before we get into this down here. Okay, ready for the next thing? So I just had a really sensible question come up in the chat about meetings, and it's kind of spooky because that was actually the next thing on my list, was to talk about meetings. If you have the full version of Copilot, you are allowed to click on the plus Or in fact, if you want a shortcut for this, type a slash. The slash you see works here in the complementary version as well. Hang on, let me just go onto a screen where we've got a little bit more space. You can see that properly. There we go. And if you're in the full version, you can find your meetings and you can select a meeting and ask it to work with the meeting. When we're working with the complementary version, we can still do that. We just have to work a little bit differently. So what I want you to do going forwards is to try and get into the habit of remembering one thing when you're inside your meetings. Let me go get our meeting a moment and bring it onto my screen. Some of you probably know this already, but up here under the More button, we have got Record and Transcribe. Now this meeting, we are recording fully. We're doing the video, we're doing the screen sharing, doing everything so that we can send it all to you later. But when you're having other meetings, like regular meetings with each other, try and get into the habit of at least doing the transcript. So this normally says, like when I first come into here, record and transcribe. And here, rather than saying stop, it says start, okay, because it isn't already running. So as a minimum, try and get into this habit of doing at least the transcript. Now, I think often people don't mind the transcript running because it feels less invasive, doesn't it, somehow, than having the full-on video thing. And I find most people are fairly nonplussed about that. And in fact, if you say to them, you know, I'm learning Copilot, would you mind if I transcribe this meeting so I can use it in Copilot later? I think you'll find most people won't worry about that. So then later, when the meeting is finished, let me just pop all of you back out of the way here. Go to your chat. So come to your chat in Teams, go find a meeting chat, and you're looking for the recap. I'm trying to think which one of these has been recorded. So this is an example of a lesson that was run online and it was recorded. And you can see down here, I have the transcript. If I come to recap at the top, I have in here the transcript. Now, again, if you have the fancy version of Copilot, which is all singing, all dancing, it does this for you. You come here, it creates your notes, it's all ready to go, nice and easy. If we're working with the more complementary version, we find here transcript, and then we go ahead and we download. Now, it's only the organizer who is allowed to download, but of course, there's no reason why you couldn't then put that in the chat for everybody else to then have access to. So download the transcript, it pops it inside your downloads folder, share it with people in the meeting if they're going to use Copilot too. And then this is a cool bit. So I can head back over to my Copilot, select that downloaded file, hide my history. Let's go do that. So I'm going to say here, add content, exactly like you see me do before. But this time I'm going to go and find that file. So I'm going to say upload from this device. Going to head over to my downloads. You can see I did this earlier. Head over to my downloads and I'm going to select this meeting transcript. And it does it as a Word document, which keeps it super easy. And I pull it here into Copilot. And I can do this, you don't have to have the full version for this. I can do this on my complementary version. This is one of the things I really like. And then I can say to it, summarize. So I could keep it really, really simple. I could just say, summarize. Or in the spirit of tip number 2, we could be a lot more detailed about exactly what we would like. So I could say here something like, can you summarize this meeting? And I could say, focus on meeting tone. I want to know if it was aggressive, friendly, fun, and any follow-up actions that are required. Now, if you happen to have a transcript, you can join in with this. If not, this might be homework for you to take away. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click send. And it's going to take my meeting notes and it's going to turn it into a report, little meeting note report focusing on things that I particularly asked for. Now we've done a few examples now, and I keep talking about these buttons and I keep saying I'm going to come back to them. So this actually would be a good time that I would definitely come to these buttons at the bottom, because if I ask it to create a meeting summary for me, I probably then don't want to just leave it here inside my Copilot. So there's a couple of ways I can take it and put it somewhere else. When you're a beginner, this first one is the best place to begin. This allows you to copy. So I could copy my notes from here. I could go across it into Word. I could go across into Outlook, and I could just simply just paste them. It just puts them in my clipboard. So I would definitely start here. But there's also, along this line, another way of sharing the prompt here. We were asked about sharing earlier. This is another way of sharing. And once you get into it a little bit more, you can also, if you wish, start to explore these pages more. So this one that looks like a little book allows me to say here, edit in pages. Oh, hang on a second. My screen sharing just shut down there, didn't it? Let me reset the screen share. That was odd. Let me just show you again what I did there, because I think the screen share for some reason just disconnected then. So I'll just reset it. This little book down here, okay, if I click on this little book, I can say edit in pages. And it kind of does like a little online document here with my summary, which is quite nice. And then again, I could send this across to Word, or I could share this with others. But I definitely think at the beginning, it's definitely worth starting with just the copy button and just simply copying from here into somewhere else and seeing how you get on.
Good questions come up, Emma. Can Copilot identify different speakers in the transcripts?
Yes, it can. So it's tricky if you're in a meeting room, because of course it tends to think of everybody as being the same person. But if you are all like we are right now, right, all connected via our laptops, if we were all having a conversation and a chat through the transcript, it would know who you were logged in as, and when they'd tag your name to show you that it's you doing the speaking. And when you then do your meeting recap, it can reflect that. So in fact, if you're all logged on like in the normal way, like as yourselves, like sitting at home on a Teams meeting, you could then even say, like in your request for feedback from those transcripts, you could say something like, can you tell me what Ken said in the meeting? So you could sort of focus on a particular person. So yes, meeting rooms are tricky, because with meeting rooms, it tends to join everybody as under one meeting room name. But if you're sitting individually on your laptops, much better, because it then recognizes you all as individuals. So yes. Okay, so I've got two more little tiny examples for you to try out if you fancy it. And then we're going to kind of come to questions. So a couple more things that I thought you might like to see. So we sent you about an hour ago, hour and a half now, an Excel file. I don't know whether anybody had time to download that Excel file, but if you did, you're very welcome to join in on this next example using your Excel file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new chat here. And then I'm going to add the Excel file, which we sent to you about an hour ago. If I can find it, there it is. And I'm going to start again with something very similar, very simple. I'm going to say, can you summarize? This is a key fact, right, or a key feature of Copilot. Copilot and summarizing, big thing. So I've started with something very simple. Can you summarize? Now, any of you, and I've recognized there's some names on the list today, so I know some of you have probably been and had training with us before, and some of you have probably done Excel training. So there is a list that we use in Excel training, which has a list of names and some like random details about that people. Some of you will have had fun looking at that data in the past. And this is the file I'm using now. So we could do this with it, keep it real simple. But what I particularly like with anything which is more Excel based is I can also ask it very specific questions. So it talks about here, for example, holiday. So I could say to it without even going into the spreadsheet, can you tell me who has taken less than 5 days holiday? And it will pull that detail out of the spreadsheet. This spreadsheet also has people's names and their salary information. So I could have done something different here. I could have said, can you tell me how much this person makes? It also allows you to create charts from the data. You can see here one of the follow-up ideas is to do a pie chart of the holiday taken. But we could also do something maybe a little bit bigger than that. So we might say something like, in fact, I got a little example here, which I will share with you in the chat to save you typing it out. Again, with this idea of thinking of more ways of doing more detailed questions. Can you create for me some visuals that compare salary by department? I'd also be interested in learning more about holiday habits, or I should say interested to learn more about holiday habits. And this will use visuals this time, which I think is a fun thing to try within Excel. So if you have to work with Excel files and data files, and you have to do a lot of analysis with those data files, it's quite interesting to experiment with them here inside Copilot Chat. I might need to give it a moment, but I promise it's going to come up in a second with some visuals for me to help me look at more clearly that data which is contained within that file. Plus some sort of information and some summaries, and then underneath, other suggestions of things that you might like to try as follow-up questions. Okay, let me just give you a minute in case you want to experiment. So what I did here was I asked it, first of all, to summarize. I then asked it to find me everyone in that list who had taken less than 5 days holiday. And then I asked it to visualize the data. And I asked it for two things. I asked it to compare salary by department. I asked it to show me some information about holiday habits. Now, you don't have to do this with our Excel file. You may have a file you'd much rather test or experiment on, so feel free to use any file you have. Remember just to use this plus button, and remember the trick with the follow-up questions.
Questions coming up on security in the chat, Emma. So if we don't get to all of the questions, we will follow these up in an email afterwards.
Yeah, so security. Yeah, maybe at the end we'll talk about security. And then we'll pick up some of these answers to some of these questions. I know some of you are probably going to have to leave exactly 1 hour past, but I'm very happy to let you have, we're happy to sort of chat for another 5-10 minutes. If anybody has questions, that's absolutely fine. And the ones which we can't manage to get to, we will answer fully afterwards. Okay. Now, 2 more examples. I could go all day, honestly. I could tell you the next thing and the next thing. Had to really rein in my examples. I thought I'm going to overwhelm everyone if I do everything I wanted to show. But 2 more examples. I thought it might be interesting to experiment with something email related. And then I thought it might be fun to try something that's more kind of creative, where we're just asking Copilot to make something up for us. So let's think of an email one first. Now, again, if you have the full version of Copilot, you can go onto a new chat right now, and you can click the plus down here, and you can add an email. It can find your emails all by itself. For those first using the complimentary version, I'm going to hopefully impress you now with the fact that it doesn't kind of matter. We can still make use of the power of Copilot, even though it doesn't necessarily find the emails all by itself. So I think what I'm going to try is something like this. So I'm going to come across to an email. This is an email that we had come in with someone requesting some training. And this is someone I'm going to talk to later today. I'm going to have a meeting with them. I'm going to discuss with them this training that they wanted. Now, I appreciate this is a training example, so of course it's a little bit focused in my world, but you can go find any email and you can try the same thing with one of your emails. And we can do different things with this. So sometimes a fun thing to say is, can you create a meeting agenda from this and use Copilot for that? But again, I'm going to go more with that idea of asking more detailed questions. So I'm going to say to it here, I have a meeting with a customer. So I'm giving it sort of, think about that slide I show you with sort of like context and, you know, sort of giving it more detail. So I'm going to tell it I'm having a meeting with a customer. Say I need to discuss their training needs. Can you help needs even? Can you help me prep for this meeting? This is what they sent. I can't do, you see, I can't leave the spelling mistake when you're all watching. This is what they sent over. And I'm literally just going to paste in that email, which you just saw me copy, and I'm going to click send. You see, it's quite a detailed set of instructions. They were very good. They understood quite clearly what it is they required from their training. And what I find quite nice is it then structures that into sort of things I want to think about, puts it into some sort of clarity for me based on the content of the email they sent me. You could try other things though. It might not be meeting prep you're after. You might want to take something someone sent you in an email and you might ask Copilot to help you turn it into a meeting agenda. And again, we can go and we can copy this and we can take this elsewhere. And then, of course, the other nice thing about this is I could then ask Copilot to help me further. And I could say to it something like, great, can you email using a similar tone and style that says, I'm looking forward to meeting you later, and ask Copilot to be a little bit more creative for me here. So just to create some information, so you can see it sort of summarized the notes I've included above, built an email for me, which I can now use as a draft, which again, I could copy from here and I could transfer across into Outlook. So in fact, any kind of creating you can use Copilot for. Another fun example is you could ask it to help you create something that you need maybe within the office. Now, I promise you this is the last one, but I thought maybe we would ask it again without giving it any files this time. So we're not giving it any documents to work with. We're just asking it now, right, to do its own thing. I've said here, create a fun invite for a staff summer party. It, not I, it needs to have a Caribbean theme. So this idea of using it for ideas, inspiration, brainstorming is also, I think, an excellent idea. So it's another thing to think about as well, which is kind of cool. So any ideas you have, any problems that you have, go across to Copilot and see if Copilot can help you. Now, I know we've got a whole load of questions coming up, but we're almost at time. So just before we run out of time, before I start wading my way through those questions, let me just bring you back to slides. So for those of you who have enjoyed the training with us today, and hopefully some of you have got some ideas to take away, because it's summertime, because we love you all, we got a little offer running for the next couple of months. So if anybody who's on the full version of Copilot would like to learn how to use Copilot in Teams, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, maybe think about booking some courses. There's 20% off on August courses. And if you can't quite make August because everyone's on their holidays, there's also 10% off in September. Now we're going to share the code with you when we share all of the information in the video later. But I just wanted to let you all know that if you have a little bit of, summertime's a good time, right, for a little extra training, some time available, that you might like to take advantage of this little offer. So thank you really for joining us today for our little free session. we've had huge fun putting it together.
Thank you, Emma,
And
for hopefully giving lots of people some good ideas of things to go away and try.
I hope so. That was the idea, wasn't it? We were trying to think of some, fun things that people might like to try.